Welcome to the Rising Laterally podcast. You will be exposed to a blend of insights, research, stories, and unique guests so that you become more fascinated about yourself and the world we live in. By connecting industries, technologies, histories, and psychologies, you can find intersections to shift your perspective and find more meaning in your life. Our commitment is to bring you an episode every week. We ask that you please support us by subscribing on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or any other major podcasting platform you use, and by rating us or leaving us a review on our Instagram and Twitter accounts. From the bottom of our hearts, we want to say thank you for listening, supporting, sharing your favorite episodes, and for helping build this community together. This is Arjun Sachdev, and on behalf of Jay Baloo, we hope you enjoy this Rising Laterally podcast episode. What's up, everybody? So look, check it out. It is the middle of October right now, and our guest today is someone that we've been super excited about, but more importantly, we're just grateful to have on in terms of his presence with us. So I think we should buckle up because we are going to be talking about psychedelics a lot today. So you know this is going to be interesting. It's going to be mind-opening. It's going to be somewhat controversial, somewhat fun, but 100% insightful. And it gets even better if you're able to do it with someone who's building a worldwide community and has a great team in place to support people who are at different stages of their psychedelic journeys. So I've actually had the opportunity to get to know him a little bit recently and definitely been following what he's been doing in terms of his posts on LinkedIn and what he's doing in the world. And I couldn't think of a better person to have on because he is going to shine light on the medicine. He's going to tell us what he's doing with his two organizations. One is called Tripsitters and the other one is called Truffles Therapy. He's going to tell us a little bit about what he's hearing from the psychedelic community, not only from first-time users, but even some of the investors that he consults with. And then obviously we're going to talk about this entire movement and why we need it. So he's got the experience as a guide, advocate, and retreat facilitator. And that's what needs to be shared because we're going to bring awareness to the mushroom, the psilocybin, psychedelics as a category. It needs to be taken much more seriously, especially given our current climate against humanity. I know he's super excited also because he recently contributed to a book called The Successful Mind. It came out this month. And this is someone who is absolutely 100% down with wanting people to locate, discover, and create more success within their lives. So if you still think that mushrooms and psychedelics are some loopy-doopy nonsense, you're at risk of missing out on the next medical breakthrough and being left behind. So I want to bring Chi into the discussion. He's also known as Chi Psilocybin online on LinkedIn if you want to start following him. But let's get this conversation. How you doing today, my brother?
Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Arjun and Jay. Really appreciate it.
Nice.
Yeah, great to have you on the show.
We appreciate it as well. And so let's just get into it. So the psychedelic space, it's going through a pretty remarkable revolution right now because people are finally, once again, realizing the potential of psychedelics in terms of them being able to solve some of society's biggest obstacles. So why don't we start there? Like, what can you tell us about the healing effects of the medicine and what your experience has been like to this point? And maybe you can talk about it in the way that you describe it, which is the spiritual ally.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like mushrooms are, the fungi kingdom is the oldest kingdom on Earth. So it's said that the fungi kingdom has been on this planet for 1 billion to 1,200 million years, so 1.2 billion years. And scientists say plants came around 700 million years ago. So, you know, the fungi predate plants by 300 or 500 million years, and human beings have been on this planet for about 200,000 years. So that gives a good initial perspective on the kind of wisdom that we are dealing with and the intelligence and everything the fungi kingdom has seen and has utilized this knowledge to help it evolve. We can be part of that evolution as well if we just open up to partnerships with other kingdoms and other species instead of thinking that we humans need to be at the top or in the middle somehow. Like we can actually just be another species in a planet full of species, and we don't have to be at the center or the top. So the mushrooms the more we do them, we realize that we're part of a web and not so much of a pyramid. And when we realize that we're part of a web, we realize that we want to take care of all the other parts of the web as well, because sooner or later, we're going to feel the effects. All the nodes in the web are going to feel the effects if one part of the web is not so healthy. So it's a very different mindset when we start heading into the psilocybin psychedelic world. And we as a species need it now more than ever. We have to stop polluting. We have to start using capital and resources to improve life on earth for everybody, that knowing that if we improve life for everybody, our life improves as well. So we have to stop seeing life as zero sum and more of like a win-win-win situation. You know, humans can win, the environment can win, and we can win as part of human beings as well. So yeah, I feel like the mushrooms, the more we dive into it, can teach us about these, and it can help us dissolve our sense of self and our arrogance, and it can help us realize that, you know, we need to, life is interdependent, and it's, you know, we're not, none of us are really independent of each other, and what one person does affects what everyone else does. So we basically have to stop hoarding, and we have to start sharing as a species, and we have to change the values in our society from accumulating, you know, being a successful person or having a successful career or making money or being free to do what we want. It's actually more like who is serving the rest of the human beings and the other species and the planet. It's not so much who is getting, but who is giving. So the mushrooms can help us change our society's cultures from one that wants to take to one that wants to give.
Mm. And was that a philosophy that you felt like you were migrating towards sort of naturally before you started taking the medicine, or is that something that the medicine really opened your eyes up to?
Well, definitely we all have our karmic momentum in this life, and
Yeah, well said. Yeah.
I think I'm pretty lucky. I mean, I am very lucky to have spent some relatively significant time, you know, months at a time in Buddhist monasteries and retreat centers. So
Mm.
the first principle in the Buddhist tradition is generosity, giving. You know, so this is the foundation of all happiness and all wisdom, and everything good in our lives comes when we give. And it's the same with pretty much every other religion as well. You know, I mean, in the Christian religion, it's all about really, right, living very simply. This is how Jesus lived, and, you know, have faith that God will take care of us. Walk in with just a staff or without even shoes, and have faith that the rest of the community will take care of us. So in a sense, the mushroom teaches pretty much the same thing. You know, the way the mycelium works, it takes from that which has too much and transports those nutrients under the ground to plants and trees that don't have as much. So underneath all the forests are the mycelium, and as human beings, we can also see ourselves as a forest as well, right? If one tree is growing huge and the rest are struggling for air or, you know, don't have water, like, it doesn't matter how big the one tree is, the rest of the trees are dying, and sooner or later the big tree is also going to fall, because sometimes the big trees also depend on the small trees for a variety of reasons. So yes, my life was going in this way, and the mushrooms have really opened up my heart and showed me a very different way of looking at life, a more soft, gentle, multifaceted. You know, the mushrooms really allow us to analyze and evaluate life from many different perspectives, not just our own. So yeah, it really does open up eyes. You know, people who have gone on many psychedelic journeys say they see eyes everywhere, and it's very true. Like, when we start going into the psychedelic realms and we start opening our eyes, it's like the rest of it's like the rest of the mushrooms become very happy, and they go, oh wow, we're recognizing, finally you're opening up your eyes a little bit. So yeah, that might be the reason for seeing eyes, is we're so connected, and we're, the mushrooms help us see the underground. What's not on the surface is what the mushrooms show us.
Mm.
And that's why this is so timely. It's because if you think about like what's going on in the world right now, you think about the division, you think about the mental stress and the trauma that people are going through, just trying to like keep up in the system, all the loneliness, all the feeling of like low self-esteem, all that stuff actually can like be remedied through this medicine. And you mentioned it before, like we are part of this larger collective, and we're not doing enough, in my opinion. And I know Jay and I have talked about this in terms of just being better for humanity. It's not like better in the sense of just like self-help, but it's better in terms of watching people actually see success and watching people actually thrive, and understanding that we're all part of this larger collective. And so the feelings that you get when you're like, taking a psychedelic or a mushroom trip, those are the feelings that need to be emanated out into the world around caring and open-mindedness and love. You know what I mean? And the fact is that we're all watching this as humans. We're watching this decay happen. And just like a mushroom grows, on decay, I think we can grow out of this too, just like the mushroom does.
Yes, you're right. Yeah. And I've witnessed that the people who partner with the mushrooms and other plant medicines are going to really, really grow. And, the mushrooms really turn the poop into gold. So, instead of, we have to really be with the gold instead of just, just relegating ourselves to the world of poop. Like we have to realize that transformation, transmutation, alchemy is possible, and that there are these, very ancient technologies that can allow us to see the poop in our own lives and turn that into something that can serve humanity. So if we're really suffering from depression, we can, if we can heal that, or if we can get better, we can use that sadness, the space and the grief that sadness left, that hole. And from that hole is where the joy and the love will pour out. So, in a lot of indigenous traditions, depression and mental illness is seen as sort of a precursor to enlightenment, or let's not use the word enlightenment, let's just say an awakening. So it's very different than the Western model, which sees these mental illnesses as something that needs to be hid, ignored, suppressed, like gotten rid of with these pharmaceutical pills. This is a major issue in our society, is so many people are on antidepressants and antipsychotics, and it's not just our generation that's suffering from this. It's going to be many generations down the road. Like sooner or later, someone's going to have to deal with all the stuff that we're not dealing with now. And we're seeing this with the environment, species are going extinct. The oceans are getting polluted. Garbage is being dumped everywhere. There's massive poison being spilled into everywhere, our rivers and our oceans. And yeah, we might not die immediately because of it, but definitely future generations are going to say, wow, like our ancestors definitely did not leave us the best, the earth that they could have left us, So we really have to think about how we will be as ancestors, and basically already pretend that we're dead. Like we want to be living for the next generation. This is how the Native Americans see it, is we don't answer to anybody in our own generation. We're answering to our previous ancestors, hoping that we're not ashamed to them. And then we're also preparing life for 7 generations down the road, right? What will our great grandchildren, what kind of life will they live? Because, if we have a son or a daughter, we can see immediately that their life will be affected. And this changes people's minds a lot, parenthood. But actually, they're going to be parents. And then, our grandchildren are going to be parents. So it really, like 7 generations down the road, is just like our current generation, So it's really important to expand our mindset to who we're living for, definitely not just ourselves.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why this generation and the last few generations have been so neurotic is that people feel like they are living on an island in time, and they don't feel very connected to those who came before them, and they don't feel connected to those who will come after them. And it's not just being on an island in time, it's also being on an island in society. People are living in more atomized families, or they're living alone. They're not connected to nature. They're spending a lot of time inside. They're not connected to their food in the very simple sense that they're not farming it or cultivating it themselves. So there's a lot of disconnection, and there's a lot of, I think, neurosis born out of the fact that people don't realize how obvious that web is that you mentioned earlier truly is when you really open your eyes to it. The earth came from the sun, the plants came from the earth, we came from the plants. All of this is an interconnected ecosystem at like a galactic level, which sounds crazy for most people to think about, but it is just simply true. And once you start to get a sense of your connection to other things in space and in time, I think it opens you up to the idea that a more altruistic way of living is really the path towards fulfillment and really the cure for that kind of modern neurosis, I think.
Yeah. And it's by design that we're separated as individuals. When we're together with family and communities, we feel like we have enough. Then we don't go to the mall to fill ourselves with clothes and handbags and a cell phone accessories, right? Then we don't need 10 pairs of shoes. We have one pair of shoes, we have 5 friends, and then we don't think about the shoes anymore. We're very happy with the people we have. So yes, it's so important to change the role of corporations in our society, obviously, and we need to find ways to counteract the damage that corporations do. And it's not just, corporations are made of humans, but it's just systematic, right? It's made so that if you're not a psychopath in the corporate world, the corporation dies, or you don't make it in the corporate world. So we have to change how people see their role and how people see their company, what the purpose is. Is it just to make shareholders wealthy? Like that's this motive and intention has led to basically all of our problems on this earth. So we really have to dig to the root. It's not if Democrat, Republican, it's like, guys, they're pretty much all the same. I mean, more or less they receive money from the same people, like just because one side wins doesn't mean the whole system changes. No, they might make some incremental changes, but especially in the US, like we're pretty right wing. Even the Democrats are pretty right wing, I mean, if Bernie Sanders is far left, Bernie Sanders is pretty moderate in other countries, like healthcare for people. This shouldn't be a controversial issue. This isn't socialism. It's just living as a society, as a community, caring for each other, public, not putting kids in, $200,000 in debt before they get out of college. This shouldn't be an issue. This is, we have to change what we think is right. And it's definitely not right to make kids into slaves and indentured servants before they even graduated, before they even know what they are or who they are, what they want to do, So it's really about changing our perspectives and promoting peace and not spending so much money on war. It starts in our own lives. Like, what energy are we putting to fighting other people and winning at all costs? And what energies are we putting into things that are more beneficial for everybody? It's not about winning. It's about totally forgetting about ourselves and seeing what's necessary for the planet and the world, and not even thinking about what am I going to get? Just having faith that if we take care of the planet and we take care of our community, naturally people are going to want to take care of us because we become, important people in society.
Yeah, I mean, some would say that we are actually here to be the caretakers of every other living creature. And if you grade us on that, like, we're failing as a society and as human beings in terms of actually being here to take care of not only each other, but even the plants and the animals. And once the indigenous people are completely wiped off the planet, because their trees are being cut down and they don't even have anything to survive off of. We're going to lose that. We're going to lose those generations from this planet. We're going to lose the people that are honoring the plants, the animals, and the ground. And we just don't even have an awareness around it because we're all caught up in this like system of, getting a milestone or like reaching some plateau and to your point around the election coming up, and it doesn't matter who wins, half the country's still going to hate the other half. And so when you hear like, the World Health Organization talking about the number of people that are suffering depression, it's like over 260 million people around the world, how suicide rates have increased by 60% over the last 50 years. Like those numbers are going to continue to increase unless we actually start to like give ourselves this ability to feel things and release our fears and go on our journeys.
Great. Well said.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But tell us a little bit about like what you're doing with Tripsitters and, the Truffles Therapy and what your life is like as a guide.
Mm-hmm. Well, we haven't held a retreat for about 7 months or so.
Makes sense.
Because of the travel restrictions, and it doesn't feel safe to gather an international crowd of people. We get a lot of requests on a weekly basis, probably about 30 now, directly through Truffles Therapy and Tripsitters, people wanting to, a guide or retreat. And just sensing why people are coming and what the problems in the world are, like people don't seek out medicine if they're healthy, basically. So, what it is seeing the patterns, what causes illness, and then, doing my best to get to the core issues and really feeling for people. That's really mostly what it is. And doing my best to make time for my own journeys without falling into, depressive holes myself. And it's like every step of the way is just opening up to more suffering and more sickness and just carrying that, and carrying it for humanity and just, feeling sad. A lot of it is feeling sad for people, and doing my best to, think about what needs to be done and how do we accomplish it. And it doesn't matter what I like or what I don't like. It doesn't matter what risk it puts me at. It's really about, even if it puts me at risk, if it can help other people, then that's, maybe we need to take risks in society. Like maybe we have to change the way we think, and maybe these things shouldn't be illegal. And maybe there needs to be people who actually say these things shouldn't be illegal. And maybe there needs to be people who actually say that we can't really trust corporations and the medical establishment to get us out of this hole that they put us in. Like, no, guys, these people, and when I say these people, I mean the corporations. Like the way the structure is made, if profit is the motive, then giving access to people and having people grow it in their own homes and to be able to share it, that's not going to be the goal of these corporations. So we have to keep fighting for people's rights to choose and grow and share and pick and gather their own medicine without anybody telling them that they can't. And much less, like, nobody should be going to jail for picking up a mushroom and eating it and wanting to explore themselves. So
you're putting a penalty on exploring consciousness.
Right. And there's a reason for this, is because when we explore consciousness, then we maybe stop becoming loyal. Maybe we stop being loyal to one party or the other, or even the United States of America. Maybe our loyalties lie with nature and the trees and the plants and the animals and the whales and the fungi. Like maybe that's who we need to ally with, and not a government that doesn't really care about you. Like, why would, my question to everyone is, why are people loyal to the United States of America? Like, what has the United States ever done for its people besides put it in debt and make people go bankrupt over medical bills, and and make students have to be indentured servants and sell their souls, you know, and sell their creativity to people that actually aren't doing anything good for humanity. So yeah, this is what it's like to be in the space, is to really just sense, just like the mycelium, a lot of mycelium nodes out there. Every email, every message goes into this processing function in the mind and in the heart, and you know, figuring out where do the resources come from, who's going to help, right? How do we align the human team to work for the human team, basically?
Yeah, well, I think to a large extent, culture is upstream of corporate decisions. I mean, we've seen that recently this year as the zeitgeist kind of shifted and began to embrace BLM in a very significant way. You started to see corporations follow suit. So I think to some extent, the problem may be that culture at large is not open to the benefits that psilocybin could offer. I think there are a lot of people out there who maybe still associated with the hippie movement, think it's like this frivolous, silly sort of just pleasurable experience that has no profundity attached to it. You know, how do you think you can evangelize the benefits of psilocybin in a way where the broader kind of population can start to get on board? Because I think if, you know, I would imagine far less than 50% of people are pro legalization at this point. I imagine if that number became a majority, you know, we would start to see the government in terms of its legislation follow suit. So how are you kind of working to change hearts and minds around that?
It's about real education, giving people the tools and the guidance necessary to, yeah, change their minds about this. You know, Michael Pollan wrote a book. He changed a lot of minds, and it's just putting out written content, video content, just speaking about it. And I would say that I think the government, um, the government scheduling of psilocybin really affects people's perspectives. So,
Yeah.
you know, we have to ask, like, who's running the government, right? Why is something that grows out of the ground that doesn't kill me and that makes me more creative and brighter and happier, why is that legal, whereas a poisonous mushroom that can kill me is not illegal? So what are the priorities? What are the incentives for governments to keep them illegal? And then, you know, we have to basically paint a mental health. We have to educate government, basically. We have to go talk with city council people, you know, state legislature. It's on us. Nobody's going to do it for us. And I think we'll find that once we start educating people and start spreading education, people's minds do change. The decriminalized nature movement has passed in 3 cities now, and they've all been unanimous votes for decriminalizing psilocybin and other psychedelics as well. So, you know, we have to see who's lobbying the federal government to keep it illegal, right? Who would lose money if psilocybin and other psychedelics were legal? And it's pretty obvious that people would stop using antidepressants as much and antipsychotics as much. And they wouldn't go to McDonald's as much because they would want to eat healthier food, and they wouldn't buy the next iPhone as quickly because they realize that they don't want to be part of the sheep herd that just goes and gives $1,200 to a corporation when it's basically the same as the phone they have now. So all these corporations that depend on people being dependent on the corporation and addicted to whatever the corporation is offering, they suffer when psilocybin and other psychedelics enter the space, because psilocybin makes people healthy, and happy people naturally don't have as many addictions. So they're, you know, even if they stop scrolling 10% as much on Facebook, right? I mean, that makes a huge difference to all these businesses that are dependent on Facebook marketing, and Facebook itself, it loses, let's say, 10% of ad revenue. So
Right.
all these, you know, and then people stop smoking cigarettes as much, and definitely not drinking alcohol as much. So it's really about, a lot of businesses and industries would more or less be suffering a lot, and they would have to find new ways to make money. And entrenched interests, don't want to find new ways to make money if the money's rolling in. So
They
it's
don't.
really understanding incentives and getting to the root and changing people's minds at all levels.
Totally. I was going to say they don't want to you can't make money on something that's positive. I mean, you think about even like the algorithms are working against us because the algorithms want you to look at the negative stuff. Like what goes viral is usually negative stuff. It's not positive stuff. So walking into a corporation or a government building right now and trying to get people to understand like the benefits of mushrooms, like maybe we need to get them to understand like being addicted to caring for people, being addicted for compassion, being addicted to the feeling of kindness. Like, because they want to sell on addiction, like we got to get them to understand the addiction that can come from the feeling of giving back. And I know that's a stretch, but that's how like crazy we have to think about this, because to your point, otherwise that's why the cigarettes are still legal. That's why alcohol is still legal, is because like those are quote unquote, relatively speaking, worse vices relative to the shroom. And so I'm just saying that unless we get them to understand addiction in a new way, and if we can get society to actually make money off of positive shit, then that's when this is gonna kind of turn around, and people are gonna be more aware of what's going on. But like Jay, you were asking like questions around decriminalization and all that stuff. And so obviously Ann Arbor was the last city to go with decriminalization, but also now there's a bunch of companies out there, specifically in Canada, that are now taking mushrooms, taking ketamine, taking MDMA and LSD and all these psychedelics and using them as ingredients. And there's some private and public companies that are gaining millions, almost billions of dollars. I mean, like this is an industry in a space that's going to grow up to like $7 billion over the next few years. So, Chi, I'd be curious from your perspective if, how you're having the conversations with investors or any businesses and how you get them to not think about it from a profit perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the idea of profit has to be questioned. And, there are people that live without profit as a main motive, and we want to be one of those people. Of course, it's okay to build a business and it's okay to offer a service and have financial abundance. We just have to change the values of society from wanting to gain profit for anything, or like the smartest people in our society today get hauled off into consulting firms, tech companies, and banks, basically, more or less, and the pharmaceutical industry. We have to change the educational system where the smart people don't want to do that. They actually want to work more in nonprofits, right? And this starts with spiritual education and spiritual values from a young age. So yeah, like investors, I mean, to be honest, I try not to talk with too many investors because, I'd rather talk with philanthropists, people who are already abundant and they realize that they don't need any more. Not people really looking to turn 1 into 5 or 10, because if we try to turn 1 into 5 or 10, that's going to cause us to make decisions that are not really good for people, right? Which means decreasing the quality, letting tech replace human relationships, fighting against decriminalization, because decriminalization means that more people have access, more people are growing, more people are sharing. That means the prices drop and that the corporations have to, find other ways to be so-called profitable. So, my role is to shift the discussion from profit to love and peace, and forget about profit. Like, don't even include profit in the conversation as much as possible. Let's just think about what's best for humanity and do it regardless of profit. Even if we have to lose everything, like maybe actually we do have to lose everything. Maybe everyone on earth actually has to give everything back for us to get back to zero, to get back to even. So yeah, that's my mindset.
Can you share some powerful stories? I know you wrote about it recently around, helping people redefine relationships in their life. I know you have a pretty powerful story around your dad. Are you willing to share that?
Yeah. Well, I've always had a very difficult relationship with my dad for various reasons. And I still have a relatively difficult relationship, but it's a lot more open now. And the mushrooms were definitely a big catalyst for opening that up. And yeah, more and more people are introducing it to their family members, their parents, their grandparents. And I've been seeing, yeah, amazing. It's like, yeah, it's unbelievable the kinds of shifts that happen in families, right? Because we're talking about entire lineages that there's this one person or this one strand of trauma that's being held by someone. But when that strand is released and dissolved, that heals literally all the generations before and all the generations after. And, people in general, what happens is people start talking and communicating with each other more instead of assuming and like hating each other. They realize that actually maybe we're all we have, family and friends. Maybe family and friends is way more important than making money or being loyal to a brand or something, or scrolling on Facebook. So the values shift, and they need to shift at the individual level, and then the family level, and then the community level. Communities, a bunch of communities lead to states and nations, and that's how we have to make changes from the bottom up.
Nice.
And yeah, I mean, just being part of this work changes my relationship, because I'm able to not see my mom or my dad as anything other than a normal human being who has their own issues, has his or her own issues. So it's allowed me to not put them on pedestals and not be angry at them because of certain things, and to be able to forgive. And for that, when I forgive them, they're able to forgive themselves. It's this kind of, if I'm not holding anything against them, then there's no need for them to defend themselves. And when they don't need to defend themselves, they can drop their masks and they don't have to pretend. So yeah, this happens at many, many indescribable levels as well.
Have you heard from users of psilocybin that you've maybe helped on their journey in about ways that the medicine has reshaped their views of the world or their relationships with those around them? Obviously, it's a very profound experience when you're in its grip, but I think the real significance is what you bring back from it into your your normal day to day. So I'm curious if you've stayed in touch with those people that maybe were with you the first time they did it, and you stayed in touch with them and heard how that helped them blossom into a more loving or more connected version of themselves in their normal lives.
Yeah, we get messages every single day. Multiple people a day contact us, and I guess, yeah, it doesn't even, at first it's like, oh my God, their life has changed. But now I assume that psilocybin changes lives. So it's just a normal course of the day, is people saying, thank you, or, you've been a part of my life, or, I want to introduce this to my parents. I work at people at so many different levels. I do my best to open up to anybody who reaches out. So, it's most people that I work with, there's never been a financial transaction, but it's really just having faith that opening up the door and being a portal for people to enter this world and their own mind and heart, like helping people trust another human being again. I have faith that the more I can do this, the more other people will be able to do it. And that's how we change, that's how we make a better world for people, is be an example, be an inspiration, and be an open person, be an open space where they can trust that I'm not trying to get anything from them. I'm just here to support them. So yeah, I mean, every day the messages are, my life is so much different. I had an amazing journey yesterday or the last week. I'm ready to reconnect. I hear probably about 20-25 times a week, I just had a journey and it was great or something like that.
Nice.
I think you're hitting on a couple of interesting word choices around being open, not necessarily giving people their space and all that stuff. I mean, what else would make a good trip guide? Like, when you think about trip guides, and maybe as you're building your organization, like, what qualities are you looking for in a trip guide or a trip sitter? Because I think those are the qualities, like, that you don't have to then take the mushroom if you don't want to, but if you can live those qualities, then it's the same effect.
Right.
So maybe if you could touch on that.
Yeah, and we're all trip sitting for each other. We're all going through a journey of life, and before, during, and after, it's all the word trip sitter. It's more like really just being there for people and being kind and generous and thinking about their needs, right? What do they need and how can I support them? That's developing compassion. Not our mind. Really, we need to change our mind from what can I get from the situation first to what can I give, and having faith more and more that the more I practice giving, the more I realize that I actually don't need that much and life supports me. And so not thinking so much about the transactional quality of the relationship, thinking more just about seeing people as, fragile children or, hurt children, traumatized children. That's basically how I see most people, is just traumatized children. And and it's difficult for me to have compassion for everyone. It's difficult for me to have compassion for people who are like destroying this earth for numbers in a bank account. But that's the level we have to strive for, is can I open up my heart to even this person? Because this person is a product of a sick system. And, the most successful people in this society are the sickest, basically. So to have compassion for the sickest people, and being gentle and soft and like a grandmother would, like a grandfather would, like a mother would, not someone who thinks about power or wants to be higher or more respected or have more status, but really someone who's like, oh, how can I serve you? What can I do? Like anything I can do to help you. That's the kind of people that we want to emulate and practice being.
Do you ever ask people when they come to you for the first time, like, hey, what's your intention? And I'm sure you ask that question, but maybe not everyone has a good answer. So how do you guide someone to think about what a good intention is if they are thinking about embarking on this type of journey?
Yeah, it's all about intention, actually. I just don't engage with people if their intentions are sincere. There's like way too many people with sincere intentions and it becomes very clear whose intentions are sincere and who still has a lot of work to do before, making themselves vulnerable. Like, if I sense any attitude in someone coming for the medicine, it's like a complete no, because there's no time for me to waste to try to change your mind. There has to be this kind of humility, this kind of, I'm ready to go into it and please support, because unless you have that understanding, it's going to be very difficult to understand what it actually takes to support a lot of people at the same time simultaneously, and to be open and receptive. And basically most of my day, not most of my day, but big events in my day are checking my messages and listening to who needs support, right? That's how I determine. And if they keep coming back to the medicine, then I can see the patterns. And sometimes it takes people weeks or months for me to really see what their patterns are. And yeah, so a lot of the work is now like at a distance, not really guiding, but just being there for people and being open for people to reach out anytime. So yeah, it's all about intention. And it's really not everyone has to say their intention. It's just about sensing the humanity and the desire and the trauma behind the intention, basically. And most people, they need to practice how to give. They need to practice meditation and being in nature. Like, that's the first step. If that isn't understood and the mushrooms are seen as a magic pill or something, it's just not going to work out. We need to really look at life in a holistic perspective, not in a taking a Band-Aid perspective, not in a taping a Band-Aid over this festering wound. We need to actually see the festering wound and make time and space as much as possible to see it and to cry and to laugh, right? A lot of us just need to cry a lot. So, and this is difficult for a lot of people because we're taught, especially as men, not to cry and to be strong. But we need to go against that ingrained conditioning and actually be confident and strong enough to cry and to see ourselves in our weakest and most fragile moments. And then we can see everyone. Like, we don't need to put on a mask. We don't have to pretend, and we can see when other people are pretending, and we can have compassion for them instead of thinking that what they're pretending to be is what they are.
Well said. One of the things that I found really interesting in one of your guides was recommending people not use the substance if they're going through some kind of spiritual emergency. I think at the same time, a lot of people that I know that have used it when they've been in very dark periods of life and they're, open to it and coming from the right place, they've found it sort of function as the part in the clouds and the wind in their sails that kind of rights their ship back to shore. How do you make that determination if you're in the right state of mind to take the medicine, and whether, it might be just what you need given the difficulty in your life to begin the healing process, or if you're in too negative a state of mind where it may make you psychologically vulnerable in a way that could be harmful?
Yeah, that's a really good question and really complex. I mostly put that because there's some things I have to say to make sure that people are leaning towards a more conservative side of thinking. But, I'm in a constant spiritual emergency and a crisis, basically. So, I mean, every time I take mushrooms, I'm in like, oh God, I don't know what else to do with my life. Like, there's nothing but the mushroom, like nothing else is working, basically. So for me, it's like for me, I utilize mushrooms and I commune with mushrooms when I am I don't feel like I need to take it when I'm happy. Like, when I'm unhappy, I need to see myself and to dive deep into the root causes. So yes, and pretty much everyone in humanity is more or less in a spiritual emergency now. So, it's all about set and setting, being in nature as much as possible. Like, you don't want to be taking big doses in cities where you have neighbors that might call the cops on you, or that might knock on your door while you're having a bigger dose. And if you do live in a city and you can't get out for some reason, then it's good to microdose and take some smaller doses. Like, you really have to play around with the balance and seeing how much space and time there is for, to go into oneself, and what are one's responsibilities, and then shifting priorities. Like, instead of scrolling Facebook for 10 hours a week, maybe I can set half of that time apart to go into nature. Like, it's really just these little things that make a huge difference. So what is sucking time? And I'm very guilty of basically wasting my days, because it's, for me, like, I know every step I take on this journey just opens up the door to more people reaching out. And sometimes it's really, I want to just escape, right? I just want to play a game, or I just want to not deal with anybody. Like, sometimes I go, I don't want to deal with anybody who's sick. Like, it's too much. Like, I'm sick, So, but, going on mushrooms opens my heart again so that I can go in it with compassion instead of this resistance. So
dude, that's pretty powerful. That's pretty powerful, like, and noble what you're doing, because if you think about it, you are sitting there for possibly hours at a time. And depending on the person in front of you, you could be taking on a lot of stuff that you didn't even know was coming your way.
For sure. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We've seen some explosions, some psychoses. Yeah, a lot of suicidal ideation, a lot of grief, a lot of shame, guilt. And it's beautiful to witness. And sometimes there needs to be space because it's like, oh my God. It's like then it's very difficult to connect with people on a day-to-day basis because there's
Yeah.
not that much. Like, I don't want to talk about superficial. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do tomorrow? Like, that's not. I just witnessed someone's life of trauma and lineage and ancestry and sadness, and like someone just melted down. Then, I sort of, the rest of life, sometimes I avoid, like, I can't deal with other humans that, because I need to keep my space for this kind of work. So yeah, it's a balance. And I wouldn't say I'm a noble person. I would just say that I have a lot of karmic debt. I have, I've, my life hasn't been all love and light, and I have some pretty unwholesome tendencies still now. And this work is a beautiful path to help me and help others escape from these kind of bad karmic tendencies, basically. So a lot of it's I'm pretty selfish.
That's awesome. I think we all are in one way. And, I think that we're all, this is a good thing when you even hear about Harvard Law School. I think later this month, they're coming out an entire session on can psychedelics save America? So I just think about, like, when we think about what's happening in society, there is this need for some cleansing. And again, when you get organizations like Harvard Law and all that to be involved, I think that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, you're very right. And yeah, we need to get all the law schools, all the medical schools should be talking about this. Like, why is this being kept under wraps? Like, obviously antidepressants and antipsychotics, they have their functions, but they haven't led to better mental health. They do not heal the root issues. They just keep suppressing it. So, like, what do we want as a society? I think we have to determine that. Do we want to keep pushing things down and keep driving forward like we're cogs in the machine and that we're the machine? Or do we want to realize that we've made some serious mistakes as a society, and do we want to say sorry for these mistakes? And do we want to forgive ourselves for these mistakes? And do we want to finally stop making the same mistakes? Like, we have to actually turn the ship around instead of just thinking that we can keep going and that everything's going to be fine. Like, guys, we've already hit the iceberg. Now we just have to salvage as many people as possible. This is the stage we're at in our society. So yeah, I mean, everything that's happening now is not overnight. Like, this has been festering for decades, right? Racism is still very much alive in the United States in a very radical way. So yeah, we can't keep ignoring the issues. We have to face it. And that means we have to face ourselves, and we have to face our own darkness and our shadows and the evil aspects of our own minds. And we have to come to terms with that and forgive ourselves and forgive other people as well.
Yeah, the word society has come up a lot in the last few minutes, and I came across an interesting definition for society relative to community in a book I was reading. Society is a group of people gathered together with a specific purpose that may be short or long term. So it's very purpose driven. And a community is a group of people gathered together to share a transcendent or a transformative experience. And I think a lot of people really don't have a sense of community anymore. They don't have a community in their town. They don't have a community at their school. They don't have a community, with a religious institution. Whether or not you are a fan of Judeo-Christian dogma, it did provide people with a certain sort of community and a platform for that transcendent experience. I imagine there are a lot of people that have never had a transcendent experience, period. Like, that word doesn't even really register for them. So I think one of the things that people, need to understand about psychedelics is that it isn't like a drunk from alcohol, right? Like, it's not like this joyous, happy, easy experience. Like, a transcendent experience is quite difficult. And you brought up the idea of the shadow. Like, it you have to look into a mirror that you've never looked at before to really have a powerful transcendent experience. And it's actually quite a challenge. And that's why people get so much out of it, because it's not just this sort of light, airy thing. It's a real commitment if you do it deliberately. So, in lieu of community, though, I think people should still be striving to find some kind of community. I think psychedelics are a powerful way of providing people with that transcendent function.
Yes. Yeah, very well said. Yeah, community, the two words that now my mind and heart are constantly revolving around is community and education. So yes, we need to return to community. We need to give power back to people and back to families and back to groups of families that form these communities. And that means taking power away from corporations and centralized governments. We have to decentralize it. We actually have to become a democracy again, instead of basically, kleptocracy, oligarchy, right? We don't live in a democracy. People don't feel like they have power. They don't feel like they have choice in, growing up, or, unless you're born in a wealthy family. And then even then you might not have choice. Like, your parents might force you to enter the family business or something like that. But especially if you're poor, like, you have the military, or you go into debt for school, or you start working at a gas station or retail. And even that, like, you're competing with college graduates now, So yes, it's all about community and gathering. And now it's probably a lot of it's online. And the more we have community, the less we are dependent on, Facebooks. And like, we have to take community offline, and actually we can't depend on corporations to give us community. We do not need corporations to give us a sense of community. We are actually self-sufficient, and we have everything it takes as human beings to make it and to survive and to thrive. And that's the mindset we have to return to if we're ever going to make it out of the current state of humanity.
That's also well said. And Jay, you mentioned earlier, like, this is not an easy experience. Like, it's painful. And the reason it's painful, and Chi, you would agree with this because this is from the chapter that you wrote, it's because you're practicing how to die before you actually die. When you're letting go of all your attachments, when you're letting go of your ego, when you're letting go of the way you think, the way you react to things, that is painful. That's you dying. So that's why, there's some courage that goes into a well-intentioned session.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're like caterpillars and becoming butterflies, and then we live a moment as a butterfly, and then we have to return to our caterpillar state to work through some more, deep. A lot of it's ancestral, many eons and generations of trauma. I'm sure you guys have seen in your journeys, like, you see things. People will see things in their journeys that they've never seen in this life. Like, what was this, right? It's like another planet, or it's another realm, or they're another human being, or another animal, or something even beyond that. They're like a tree or a plant or a flower or something, or a butterfly. So it really shows how we're all connected, and that consciousness might not be just limited to this lifetime, this body. In the Buddhist perspective, and this is a very limited understanding, but consciousness moves from body to body depending on the karmic momentum. So when the body dies in one lifetime, the consciousness will find another body to manifest its karma in. So yeah, and to realize that, yeah, we're very lucky as human beings. We have so much leisure and pleasure, and it's up to us to use this human life not frivolously, but for the benefit of all beings. Like, this is the way, we need more bodhisattvas in the world who sacrifice their own pleasure and self-interest to serve humanity. We need more Gandhis and more Martin Luther Kings, right? Like, we used to have Gandhis and Martin Luther Kings who really wanted to turn over the establishment, but like, now, where are those people? They don't really get too many platforms, because all the platforms are being created by the establishment. So of course, the establishment isn't going to put on their platform people who want to destroy the establishment. So we have to create new platforms, and we have to work together, do little things really well, and we have to raise people up who are doing really good things and help them spread the message and help them amplify the message. And we have to give the mushroom the platform, you know, like psilocybin has been here for a long time, way longer than humanity has. And they have something to say. Like there are super ancestors that are like, guys, wake up or you're literally all going to drown and die in a metaphoric way, right?
Yeah.
And it's actually not metaphorical now with the seas rising. The many communities are being affected by, you know, harder rains and stronger hurricanes and more tsunamis. Like, guys, this is all here already. There's no waiting for tomorrow or waiting for a government to change things for us. Like, no, governments have never done anything for the environment, and they're not going to start, right? They have no incentive to start unless they're already in an emergency situation, and then they start thinking about, okay, what do we have to do? Guys, it's already late. Like, human beings have way less control than we think, you know? If we've been going in this one direction for so long, we can't just say, okay, nature, stop, or we're going to stop everything. Let's rethink. Like, nature is not going to rethink. It's just going to kill off what's hurting it. So we don't want to be the ones that are hurting nature. Otherwise, we're really hurting ourselves.
100%. Is that actually what brought you to Costa Rica? Is just being closer to the cultures that had it, like, you know, in Central America and Mexico and all that stuff? And the other thing I wanted to mention, because you talked about like how mushrooms have been here for so much longer than we've been. And one other thing is that they actually take in oxygen and give off carbon dioxide just like humans do, whereas plants do the other. So we're more like a mushroom, and a mushroom is more like a human than it is a plant.
For sure. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yes. And it's, yeah, pretty much our nervous system looks like mycelium. So yes, we are much closer to, animals are much closer to fungi than we are, fungi are to plants actually. And yeah, Costa Rica doesn't have a military. There's beautiful nature, and they put a lot of money. Well, supposedly they put their focus on education, environment. So yeah, it's got a way different vibe. Like, it's not the land of the dollar where everyone has to hustle for the next dollar and where everyone's trying to take dollars from each other. Like, this is why we're sick. Every time we go out, if we take a day out, there's like $100 in parking and 2 meals and you know, to just that, right? 2 meals and parking is like $70, $100 easy, right? If you're in LA or New York. So here, I mean, I'm living in very close to a small town called Puerto Viejo. It's on the Caribbean side, but I don't have to transact money for even a week if I don't want to. And I was before being on the Caribbean coast, we were living near the highest mountain in Chiripo. And I wouldn't leave the retreat center I was staying at sometimes for 2 weeks, and I wouldn't exchange any money. So when we don't have to exchange money on a daily basis, like, we think about money less. We can live simpler, and we can think more about the bigger problems instead of how do I get the 1 to a 2 in my bank account. Like, this is the smallest problems humans can solve, and humans should not be solving this small problem that actually is so temporary. We should be focusing on the long-term, infinite problems that are facing our generation and many generations down the road.
Yeah, I'm curious, in your current living situation, are you living with other people? Are you like farming your own food, or how do you go a week without transacting any currency?
Yeah, well, I can go a week. I mean, now we have a little grocery stores nearby. We have a couple of stands. So every day, I mean, we do give a few dollars, but it's not like we don't have to. Like, we can buy a week's, if we wanted to live less conveniently, we could buy a week's worth of food and just keep it in the fridge. I mean, I'm not a farmer, but there are quite a few farmers around here. But yeah, it's like getting closer to the source of the food, right? Like, the papaya that we're eating, how many hands did it have to go through? Like, did it have to go through, is it straight from the farmer, or is it a farmer to a distributor to us? Or is it like a farmer that gives it to a corporation and then they ship it from, Chile, and then it goes to a warehouse, and then the warehouse people have to bring it to the store? And how many hands does it go through, and how fresh is it? I think the less hands it has to go through, the healthier it is, because you can eat it at its peak ripeness instead of having it have to be picked before its peak ripeness. And we can avoid some of the chemicals that have to be put on these foods uh, because they don't have to be preserved for as long.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like little tiny things like this that, like, it's like questions like, how can we reduce the average number of hands that a papaya has to go through from farmer to eater, from like 5 to 2? Like, that's a huge problem that humanity should all be working together to solve, right? These are the big problems that we should be focusing on.
Gee, here's how I know we're all connected, and this is so timely. I'm currently reading a book, both of us are, called The Secret Life of Groceries. In that book, he actually talks about, here in the States, by the time it takes you, or by the time the apple is in your hand that you're about to bite into, it's taken 45 days to get to you on average. And so a lot of hands have touched it. It's been in a lot of boxes, on a lot of trucks, just to get to that store that you're going to go to. So to your point, like reducing the number of hands, and no one understands the secret life of groceries, bro.
Yeah,
Beautiful. Thank you.
Arjun and I were talking about it yesterday too. Even something like pepperonis, like taking what was once a sentient animal and then cutting it up into perfect little circles and putting it on your pizza and calling it a pepperoni instead of the name of the animal it originally was. We're so alienated from our food in those kinds of way, and we don't even pay any attention to. It's not even something that could be paid attention to because it's so ingrained in the way that we think about food. And I think that sort of alienation from food is just emblematic of our alienation from nature in general. You mentioned people living in cities. I mean, I imagine you have a lot of opportunities to feel the grass or the dirt underneath, your bare feet out in Costa Rica. I imagine there are people in cities that, have gone years without actually feeling the earth under their feet, and what that does to your psychology. I can only imagine, but I would think it would make you feel much less connected with nature, much less empathetic towards nature, much less interested in nature. It's one of the most fascinating things that we have, and we are obviously of nature. And when you live totally disconnected from it, it just, I think, wreaks havoc on your own psychology.
Yeah, for sure. And it turns people into depressed corporate slaves, basically, because that's the only life they know. Like, once we touch, I mean, I'm barefoot most of the day. I rarely wear shirts unless I have to. I mean, yeah, once we touch the earth and we're living with the trees, we go, wait, corporations? Like, no, I don't want anything. I want as far away from corporations. I keep them very far from my mind and my heart. I want to be with the animals, the bugs, the howling monkeys, the toucans, right? Like, these are my friends. Like, corporations are not our friends, basically. So we have to change our mindset from getting things from corporations to getting as little from the corporations as possible, and like living a sustainable life, living on the earth, living from the earth. And yeah, of course, it's not easier. It's way easier said than done. I depend on the computer and my iPhone all day, every day, and my microphone, and all this had to be shipped from China. So I'm definitely not perfect, but for me, I think about the ideal and how can we move towards ideal, even if we're living in an imperfect situation now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think out of all this, it's just like the feeling that you're talking about is what needs to be shared with the world and passed along to different generations. And look, now we're at a point where the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, is calling psychedelics and mushrooms a breakthrough therapy for mental health. So again, we're on the brink of something pretty big here. Oregon, later this year, is going to be going to the ballot, voting on making it legal, and even Washington D.C. is on the ballot as well. So like, we're making these steps in society to actually get to the point that you're trying to get us to, Chi.
I don't think I'm trying to get, I think it's all the mushroom and the plants. They've been working to get humans to wake up for quite a while now. And some people like me, we have nothing left in our lives except to put ourselves out there as messengers of and ambassadors for the other kingdoms to humanity. Like, guys, humans, please wake up. You know, we're just little infants on this earth, guys. Like, we have so many more generations to go. Please, let's think about other people instead of just how can I get the best food in my mouth. You know, this is really where we have to change. We have to forget about, you know, the getting the best or something like that. Of course, we can live in abundance and we can have very high quality things and we want to eat good food, but it shouldn't be the purpose of our life to eat good food. Like, that's an empty life. No matter how much good food we eat, we're still going to turn into dust and the dirt. So doesn't matter. Like, let's focus on the way bigger picture, which is like, how do we get good food to all beings, right? This is the big problem, not just my own mouth. How do I make it so that everybody can have clean water and clean food? So humans, we just need to open our minds and think bigger. Like, stop thinking about ourselves, take ourselves out of the equation and think about the big problems and the issues and the challenges facing humanity. And how can we step up and be warriors and go do our best to talk with other warriors? How do we resolve these issues, you know? And yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. It is tough. I hear you that, you know, it's worth striving towards an ideal. We're obviously living in a situation now where there's so much structure in place that's hard to work within to make these kinds of changes, and whatever change will come will likely be gradual. But if we don't start making those gradual changes, you know, we're heading towards the edge of a cliff. Not just environmentally, but I think psychologically as well. I mean, you know, if people continue to be less fulfilled, less happy, you know, unhealthier, if that trend continues, where do we end up? You know, miserable, dying early of either poor health or suicide. You know, I mean, you can just look at the statistics. You know, if that downward trend continues, you know, it's sort of the end of human flourishing in the modern world. So there's definitely a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah, beautiful.
So Chi, people can find you on LinkedIn, Chi Psilocybin. Do you have a website that you want to share as well?
Yeah, they can find us at trufflestherapy.com, TRUFFLES therapy.com. And also tripsitters.org is undergoing a major renovation, and we're pretty close to releasing a version 1. We're going to be doing a lot more webinars and courses and really spreading education as much as possible. And as much as possible, we're going to do it by donation or contribute what you can, or you know, the basic idea is nobody is turned away for lack of funds, because I never ever in my whole life want a situation where I withheld healing or access to information from someone for a few dollars. You know, that's like a failure. That's like shameful. So as much as possible for free, generous. You know, of course, the deeper dive courses we're going to have to charge a little bit more for, because it's going to be about creating community and integration circles. But yeah, hopefully more and more people start microdosing. My vision is that, my hope is that more people wake up at all levels of society, especially politicians, corporate CEOs, and they can, you know, turn some of their billions into clean water and clean food, and, you know, support mental health instead of accumulating and letting money rot in their bank accounts or their corporations. So this is the vision of the mushroom, and, you know, my job is to just support this vision.
No, we appreciate it. And, you know, I think having you on our show, like, it's amazing to be exposed to someone like you and your perspective, and this idea that we've been talking about as well, which is being better, not bitter. And so just all along those lines, having you on, we're super grateful to have you here.
Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it, Arjun and Jay.
I'm gonna ask you one last question, and that is, who is the musician, or what is the type of music that you will always recommend to people?
Yes, Marina Ray, Marina space Raye. She's been an amazing support on all my journeys. A Native American flute, really, really beautiful. There's a song called Peyote Healing by Robbie Robertson, I think. Amazing song. And Imi Oi, Imeeooi, she's a Buddhist chanter. Really amazing. Some of the Buddhist Sikh chanting, also Snot Namkar, she's a Sikh chanter, really amazing. So really like love and peace, this kind of joyful vibration, sharing it. Whoever is doing that, that's who I recommend.
I love that.
Also, that's a lot of great recommendations. Yeah, I gotta watch it. I'm gonna have to go back through and write all this down. Have you ever heard of Mongolian throat singing? Geez, that sounds like something you might be interested in.
Yeah, it's pretty beautiful, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I've just heard it recently. I really appreciate it. Yeah, well, Arjun said it better than I. Really appreciate having you on. It was a great conversation.
Great. Thank you guys so much. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, G.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Rising Laterally. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and were able to walk away with some new thinking that could help you in your personal or professional growth. Please make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. And if you know of someone who could benefit from this episode, we'd love for you to pass it along. See you next week.